In today's video, we have a 1/6 scale version of Ada Wong, character from the video game series Resident Evil. I myself am not a horror fan. I'm not a big horror fan of horror movies or horror video games, so I've not played any of the Resident Evil games, so I don't really know much about Ada Wong, but I think the character looks cool, I liked her pose, and just so we're going to go ahead and do Ada today. I already went ahead and printed her and assembled her temporarily and gave her a coat of black primer, and now I'm going around with a white paint. White ink also works just fine for this, just a nice thin coat, and I'm applying this called a zenithal highlight, which is basically you're putting the white on from the top down, or basically where your light source is, so from the light source down onto your model. And what this is going to do is going to help accentuate the colors that we're going to be putting on the model later in the video, keeping the areas that are more towards the light source brighter and the colors that are in the shadows darker. And I know there's been a few comments and questions in past videos about if zenithal actually really truly works, because it seems like you just covered up anyhow with paint later on. And in the video here, I'll try to highlight a couple areas where you can still see the zenithal highlight shine through the paint, if you will, both in the highlight areas and in the shadow areas, especially on the skin areas and her red dress. So for the zenithal, I want to make sure I get nice bright whites in the lightest spots or the brightest spots, and I typically don't go full black even on the shadow areas. I still want to have a little bit of a like a gray color even in the darker areas, so some of the color will still kind of shine through, if you will. So I'm going to start off the colors with her skin, and here I'm using a sunset red color. I'm painting the skin in layers. Think of what's underneath their actual skin is, you know, that red tissue and that. So this is what that color is supposed to represent and help kind of boost the vibrance of the different colors of a person's skin. So as always with the airbrush, putting on really thin layers or coats of paint. You can still see the zenithal definitely shining through in the lighter areas versus the dark areas, and that's absolutely what you want. You want to make sure you're not putting this on so thick that you have completely basically erased the work you did with the zenithal. And you want to make sure that you have a full coverage of your skin, both in the shadowed area as well as in your highlight area. Here I masked off the white part of this piece. Her hips still have a little bit shown there as I'm painting. I just wanted to mask off the dress to eliminate some extra work I'd have to do later on. Another benefit of the zenithal is when you're painting each piece separately, the zenithal is going to remind you where your light source was when the model was assembled, so it's a little reminder of where your shadowed areas are versus where your light highlight should be. Here I'm using a tan flesh from Pro Acryl, and this is going to be my base color for the skin. And here again, I'm going to go ahead and apply this over the entire skin, both shadow areas and highlight areas. Again, thin coats. I want to make sure that I'm not putting it on so thick that the zenithal, the shading or the highlighting isn't shining through. Of course, both the sunset red and now this flesh color that we're putting on. And I'm also making a little effort to not completely cover up every bit of the sunset red. I'm a little uneven coats, just a little bit here and there to give that that skin more of a natural look to it, more of a where some of the skin might be a little more red than others. You know, skin is just not one color; it's many, many, many colors that are all intertwined with each other, so to speak. So I go a little thin. I don't completely skip over the sunset red, but I might go a super quick, just brush airbrush stroke over certain areas to leave a little bit of it shining through more than others. And here you can see, after applying both the sunset red and the skin color, we still have areas that are brighter and in areas that are darker based on where that zenithal was. So you can still see the zenithal still working. It's obviously not as pronounced as it was, but it's not supposed to be either, but it's still giving you that highlight and that shadow. Now switching over to using a transparent red, and this is also watered down. It's not straight out of the pot. Watered down transparent red. You can use like a glaze consistency, just regular red paint would work. You can use a red ink, it's watered down. Any of that will work. The idea is just a super thin red, and I know in the video it looks like it's blasting this on like really a bright red, but it actually is fairly transparent here. What you want, the idea with the red is it's in the folds of the skin. It's where the recesses of like a muscle would be, the backs of the knees, the under like the ankle bones, and in the darker areas, the shadowed areas of the skin. And here it's just putting this color back in the skin, but bringing your shadows back in. But with the color of the skin, not necessarily just a dark color. You want the colors to make sense with the skin tones that you're painting. So I know right now it looks very harsh and overdone, and it is harsh and overdone. But this is where what I call that back and forth process begins, where we push the skin in a dark or a red direction too far one way, and then we'll bring our other colors back here in a moment to balance it all out, with the final goal of getting a realistic skin color that isn't all just one color, but a mixture of these lighter pigments and these darker reds that in this case what her skin tone would actually end up looking like in real life. Switching to the next color, which is this Warm Flesh by Pro Acryl. This has got a yellow tint to it. And this is my way of introducing a little bit of the yellow pigments within skin. And it'll just give the skin another dimension and a push in the color range of the direction I'm trying to take this particular model. I'd also consider this color my first highlight color, so I'm only going to be applying this from the light source direction downwards to the model, and maybe like a 45 up to maybe even a 90-degree angle away from the top center, but I don't want to apply this color from the bottom up. So all that red we put on previously is still going to stay red for another step or two. Again, this is just like the first highlight color and the first attempt at starting to blend our colors together. You can see here working on the leg. I think this piece is actually the best piece for demonstration purposes of what each stage or step of the skin painting process is actually doing. You can see we're pushing back a lot of that red that was applied in the previous step, but certainly not all of it. And again, concentrating this light source from the top. I'm holding the piece in kind of a way with the airbrush that it may look like I'm not going from top down, but I really am. I was just trying to hold it in an angle that was easier for the camera to see what I was doing. Again, you can see more of the red on the bottom and the back, and where that is, where the shadow area is, and I'm really concentrating on putting this on the areas where the light source is going to be hitting the skin the most. And with faces, same thing applies. Top down, hit the forehead, the top of the nose, the cheekbones, the top of the chin, the top of the lip, and that top of the ear. This particular model, most of her head is covered up with her hair, so I'm obviously not worried about the top of her head other than past her forehead. And the back of her neck is pretty much covered up as well. So there's a lot of her head that I don't necessarily have to worry about with this model, but it's definitely the face that I'm making sure that I don't get this highlight color on the underside. Moving on to this Orcish Dermis color by Scale 75. I do know this color can be hard to find in areas, but it really helps with the transition between that red we put on the underside and the skin tones that we previously applied. In this Orcish Dermis, I've watered down at least 50-50. It might even be more water than paint in this to really help with that thin transition between the red and the skin tones. And again, like we did with the red, it's not just the underside, it's also in where the skin might fold back on itself, on a bent elbow, on the wrist bones, ankle bones, in the recesses of a rippling muscles. So those kind of areas is really where you'd want to make sure you put this, as well as like on the ends of elbows and knees, areas where the skin might be a little more rough or well worn, if you will. And also, just like the red, I'm going to be pushing this Orcish Dermis a little too far, if you will, too aggressive, which is intentional because then we'll come back and push it back into its proper levels with the blending of additional highlight skin colors in the next step. For that skin highlight, I'm using this basic skin tone by Vallejo, and this is going to be the color that I'm going to go ahead and use again from the top down. This is my true skin highlight color, so I'm really going to be concentrating this on the areas that I want it to be the brightest on the skin, so that the parts of the skin that are facing the light source, as well as also helping with that transition of the Orcish Dermis into the regular skin, or the highlighted portions of the skin. So the straight leg piece, again, as you can watch, I'm going ahead and putting multiple coats in the highlight areas here, and I'm using less coats in the areas where I want to blend the Orcish Dermis into the other skin color. That way I can still have this variation of skin tones where it looks natural, the transitions look natural, but I still have my highlights in the brightest areas, like on the top of her thigh there, and then at the top of her foot, where the light would be hitting those areas more so than like the back of her thigh or the side of her calves. So here's an example of using a thinner coat to help with that transition of the orchis dermis into the normal skin tone there. And again, just like the previous step with the face, top down, forehead, nose, cheeks, top of chin, and just helping with a little bit more transition here and there if I see a need for it to be like a nicer transition where it might just be too harsh in certain areas, maybe lower on the chin bone or something like that. For Ada's hair, I chose this black-brown color. It was really torn between a solid black or something with a little bit of color, so I chose this black-brown. It goes on very flat, however, so afterwards I went and put a satin varnish protective coat to give the hair just a little bit of a sheen. Using this liquid mask on the hip parts that were already painted on her dress. This just obviously to protect the skin so I don't have to try to repaint this. And I'm just really putting super thick coats of this liquid mask in here. I'm just lathering it up pretty aggressive, pretty thick as you can see. And then wait for that to fully dry before doing anything else with this part. Her dress has a lot of texture that I wanted to make sure I was able to capture. So after going over the dress a little bit with some white touch-up to get the areas that the paint may have pulled off, I'm using this red contrast paint and putting this on thin, again, always thin coats. And you can see really obvious how this contrast paint works really well with the zenithal highlight approach. So the shadowed areas of the dress there are very, very dark red, whereas the areas that I put more white on to boost the areas of highlight, the areas of the light source, you can see are going to be a much lighter red or a brighter red. For her shooty sticks, I'm using this black metal metallic paint from scale 75. Going around, obviously careful not to touch any of her skin, of her hands, fingers, and that, and just giving each of these shooty sticks a smooth, even coat. While they look pretty decent after a fresh coat of paint, I will be coming back and doing a little extra work to these here in a little bit later. Ada's dress has straps that extend up to wrap around the back of her neck. So to capture that same look of the contrast red, you need to go ahead and put the white back onto the straps first. So once the white's there, it'll boost the red to the same colors as on the rest of her dress. After the white's dry, come back with that same contrast red that I airbrushed on her dress, and now I'm just hand painting that on the strap that wraps around the back of her neck and down her chest. So one thing about hand brushing contrast paints are they're very runny. You don't have to water these down. They're already really almost water to start with. So when you're doing detail work like this, you got to be extremely careful you don't have too much paint on your brush and lose control of it, and just go super slow and just work very carefully against the areas that you don't want to have the paint obviously applied to, in this case her skin. Ada has a lot of trim pieces to her, whether it's part of her dress and her chest, the straps on her thigh, the holster, etc. So for all these pieces, I'm using the satin black to paint those. And the satin black is nice. It already has a nice built-in, really nice sheen to it. You can get the same effect by using a flat black and going ahead and putting a satin varnish on it afterwards, but here it's just kind of, you know, one and done, both the paint and the varnish together. So I really like this this particular black. Again, super careful, taking my time when I'm painting anything that's on top of the skin, because touching up the skin at this point is a hassle, it's a challenge. So if I don't have to, win-win. Going ahead and pulling off the liquid mask that we put on previously to protect her skin, little skin parts on her hips there, before I get back to painting the black trim that's also on those parts. See that I flip the model around almost constantly when I'm painting, and the reason for that is I'm always looking for the most comfortable spot to hold my brush when it comes time to make these brush strokes that are need to be very carefully placed so I don't inadvertently paint like black on the red, for example. So I'm constantly flipping the model, and I always want to find that most comfortable brush stroke. If it doesn't feel comfortable, I know I'm most likely going to be making a mistake, which I don't want. So I always just take my extra time, find the proper position, the direction I want to use my brush, brace my hands against each other, against the desk, whatever it takes to just make sure that I have the most steady brush stroke and smooth brush strokes that I can do. So getting close to finishing up all the black trim, strap, leather work. Just painting the holster now. And the holster is pretty straightforward to paint, but there's also the inside portions as well that you want to make sure you get full coverage on and not have any of the overspray from painting the skin still showing. For her shoes, I decided to go with a standard flat black. Any normal black would work here, and painting that on like I would any other color. But then later, after the black is fully dried, I come back with a gloss varnish and brush that on as well, as I wanted her shoes to have that really shiny black effect. Here I'm revisiting her shooty sticks with the intent of making them look a little darker and more interesting. I just felt like even though that was a black metal metallic I put on, it wasn't dark enough for me. So I'm going ahead and using this black wash, and I'm making sure I put more into the recesses of the mechanical parts, and putting less across the rest of the model, but I am using it kind of like a filter or a stain or whatnot just to darken the entire part. In the flat areas where I didn't want to have so much, I just whisk it off with the brush and then wipe any excess on a paper towel or tissue or whatnot, just to make sure that I don't have too much and make it look stainy. I just want to have a nice smooth finish on the flat areas. I chose the silver from Vallejo for the metal parts of Ada. The snap on her holster, the buckles, the rivets on her straps, and the little ornamental piece here that's part of her necklace. And I'm also using it for her bracelet that's wrapped around her left wrist. Moving on to Ada's portrait. I'm using a slate gray watered down and low air pressure and just a little burst into each eye. And the idea with this is just to get more of an eyeshadow right there, kind of underneath her eyebrow and above her actual eye, before moving on to her eyelids. And I'm just using a standard black for this. Using the same color as I used for her hair to do her eyebrows. Just taking nice, slow, steady brush work here to get the eyebrows in place. And as always, using deck tan for her actual eyeballs and going in there and just taking my time and making sure that I have a nice smooth line or transition between the actual eyeball and the eyelid black. Making her eyes brown shows this this leather brown for the darker portion of the brown eyes, and I'm painting it so her gaze is she's looking to her left, and just go ahead and sketching that in a little bit first before fully shaping the iris with this brown. And then I'll go in with a lighter brown and I'll leave a little bit of the darker brown showing on the edge, and then put lighter brown towards the center of the eye, even though it's not really center because she's looking left, and then finally going in with a little black for her pupil. And I chose this Bugman's Glow for her lip color. Moving on to her base. The base I ended up printing with FDM printer, my Bambu Labs. Not just the base, but this skull here as well, this demon skull thing. There's both FDM printed. It saves a ton of resin. It prints so much faster overall, and it's just cheaper. Filament's much cheaper than resin, so I'm happy that I'm able to print some of these larger pieces with the FDM technology. Here I'm using a Skeleton Horde contrast paint. I'm not going to be happy how this looks, but I wanted to keep this in the video so you could see how it got tinted with this yellowish brown to start with. So I'm changing things up. I'm using a Xandri dust, and I'm doing this from the shadowed areas. So I'm spraying a thin coat of this from the underside to give it more of the darker yellowish brown color that you see here. And then I'm using Wraithbone by Citadel, a much brighter, almost an ivory type color here, and I'm spraying this from the top down to give it a lighter appearance this way. And I was thinking that this was going to be just fine for the skull. However, after it dried, I still wasn't happy, and I did this. I grabbed a sepia wash here, and I liberally sloshed this all over the model to help bring out some more of the definitions of the bone structure, the recessed eye sockets, the teeth, etc. In order to avoid any water staining marks and such, just keep moving the brush. Always start where you left off, keep it wet, keep moving forward. It's a little bit of a rush to get this on without having those watermarks up here. And also any areas that I want to make sure I don't have a very large, heavily concentrated amount, like on the flat part of his skull, I will whisk that off to that paper towel that I have underneath my hand. And now I'm almost happy with the skull, but I decided to take that Wraithbone paint and just do a dry brush over the top features of the skull here, the horns and and whatnot, just to give that final punch of contrast and highlighting of the details of the skull. I use a flat black in the airbrush to give the rim of the base a nice even coat. Then I take the Scrag Brown from Citadel and apply this to the entire surface of the base. After the Scrag Brown is dry, I take this Agrax Earthshade wash and liberally apply this all over the top. I just want to be careful I don't hit my black that I already put on for the trim of the base. And here's some really janky video of the model after I just finished assembling it with a combination of E6000 and super glue. Overall, I'm happy with how the model turned out. The parts printed well, they fit without too much additional work, and at this point I'm going to say the model is ready to be put on display. Thank you so much for spending your time here on the channel today, and I hope you found something interesting or helpful. And if you did, I would love if you would consider leaving a comment down below or even hitting the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel so much and is also greatly appreciated. And if you enjoyed this video, you'd most likely enjoy the other videos popping up on your screen right now.